Welcome all to BFantasyFootball Podcast. I'm your host, Derek, and this is my brother and my co-host, Marcel. Today we're covering our top 10 tips and tricks that we think are important for your league this year in the drafts. So the first tip is don't expect last year's number. It's rare for players to finish in the same spot they did last year.
Yeah, that's a great point. There's many cases where that happens. It's not only injuries that cause this, but many other things can cause this. You can look at players like Michael Thomas last year. You may believe that coming into this year, he's also the wide receiver number one, which you may draft him that way, but it's not promised that he'll finish that way. That also goes for players like running backs, where CMC, Christian McCaffrey, also finished number one last year at the running back position. That's not promised, although the higher percentage is there. But when you get out of the range of your top 10 at those positions, it becomes more and more variable. So your 12th running back from last year is not going to be your same 12th running back this year. So draft the players you believe will finish at those positions. Do you have anything to add to that?
No, just think of someone like David Johnson last year. I mean, he finishes a pretty good RB in 2018, and then last year, yes, he had a few injuries, but he never seemed to be able to get going this year like he did 2 years ago even.
Yeah, I agree. So our second point is early schedules matter at the draft. I don't know how Derek feels on this, but for myself, I personally look at your first 3 to 4 games of the season. I want to hit the season running. I just want to get off to a 3-0 start, 3-1 start, 4-0 start if I can, because that almost guarantees you playoffs, because then you just have to win 30% of your games down the stretch, and you can start to plan for playoffs in the end game. But before we get to the end game, as I said, early schedule matters. There's a team I really look at, and it's the Jets. I'm hands off all Jets players for the first almost 7 weeks. They have Pats, they have Bills. So when I look at the Jets, I'm thinking Brashad Perriman. People are high on him. I'm thinking Le'Veon Bell. People are starting to come down on him from the Frank Gore news. Sam Darnold, even in Superflex, 2 QB leagues, whatever it may be. These guys are going to be dropped. Not Le'Veon Bell. He won't be dropped. But Brashad Perriman, I'm high. I love the talent. I love the opportunity. But he's going to be dropped in a lot of leagues just because he's going to have the toughest corners week after week for the first 7 weeks. Sam Darnold he's a great quarterback, but hasn't proven to be able to beat very tough defenses. He's going to struggle for the first 7 weeks. Those guys are going to be free week 5, week 6, week 7. They're going to be on the waivers. You can scoop them up then, and that'll help you long term. But like I said, early schedule matters. Get the good matchups. The Raiders. I'm a Raiders fan, I'll admit it right now. They play Carolina week 1. That's great for them. Your guys like Josh Jacobs, he's going to cook week 1. The guy's going to go off. Derek Carr, he'll be a top 15 quarterback week 1. I'll put my money on it. Then we look at teams like the Eagles. Carson Wentz. What's his help? Zach Ertz. He's guaranteed plug-in. Then you look at the receivers. If Alshon's back, it's going to be mucky. But if Alshon's out, Deshaun Jackson is a boom play. You got to go out and get him late in drafts. Sanders. Depends if he's healthy or not. If he's not, then Boston Scott. If he is, he might not be a boom week 1. I know he has Washington. He's going to do fine. But the injury concern's there. So he's tough to look on. But like when I look at it, Carson Wentz, Zach Ertz, Josh Jacobs, those guys are locked and loaded. Darren Waller, locked and loaded, week 1 plays. So if I can go out and get them, I know they're going to provide for me in week 1, and I'm going to start the league 1-0, and I'm going to be happy.
Yeah, you also got to think of it like this. You don't want to draft and then turn around in not even a month's time. Nobody really wants to trade with you because all your players have done bad in the first few weeks. Nobody's going to trust them to return value. You're going to be selling low. You won't be able to sell high. Where if you take someone like possibly Kendrick Bourne, who has a decent schedule and is opened up there, you could maybe grab him and trade him after the first few weeks when you hear Debo's starting to do better in health regards. you could maybe trade him off and get something marginally better, or even package him to, use him as a package piece to get a better at one position than another. So that's always the thing, is you don't want to be losing value immediately just because they have a few bad first few games.
Agreed.
Yeah. So the next is players changing teams tend to have a harder time. Now, this is not true for all players. Running backs tend not to have such a hard time, but wide receivers and even sometimes tight ends have a harder time typically. Now, as they age, it doesn't seem to be as effective as affected because they have a bigger playbook in mind. They know their routes. They know how to work hard on themselves. So someone like Emmanuel Sanders, he's one of the hardest working players in the league. So him, I'm not so concerned about, because even like you saw last year, he went from to the 49ers and he did fine halfway through the season, and there was no hiccups because he's someone that works really hard and knows a lot. So it's not going to affect him so much. But if you take a player that's only year 2 or year 3, kind of a rookie almost even, they don't know much of even how to play in the NFL really. They got to learn that maturity and that culture to, you have to work hard. It's not the coaches coaching them. It's actually them and their own peers actually really allowing these players to learn what they're supposed to do and how hard they're supposed to work. Coaches don't do more than just teach them the plays they want to play. It's really their peers.
Yeah. And like when you look at other players, I have him ranked as 21st wide receiver, Stephon Diggs. Do you trust him this year? I don't. I have 0 shares with Stephon Diggs. Could he be a top 15 wide receiver? Absolutely. Could he be outside the top 30? Absolutely. So I'm hands off. And when I look at stuff like that, it's hard to trust those players changing teams, especially for wide receivers with questionable quarterback play, tight ends with questionable quarterback play. Then it comes to QBs changing teams. Nick Foles with poor offensive weapons, poor offensive coaching. I'm not saying Nick Foles is a bad example. I'm just saying he's a quarterback who has changed teams, who's projected to start at least a game this season. I know right now Mitch Trubisky is a starting quarterback there. Tyrod Taylor, changing team. I know he was there last year, but getting the start is a lot different. So, yeah, great point. Moving on to our 4th point is don't go into your draft with a set plan to what you're going to do with each pick. You have to stay water. You have to stay fluid. That's because players don't always drop to you. The ones you wanted don't always drop to you. It happened to me. My first draft of the season, I looked at the people ahead of me. I was like, okay, huge chance Drew Brees drops to me. And as picks were going, I was like, yep, I'm getting him. It was the guy before me, already had a quarterback, solid quarterback. I want to believe he had Aaron Rodgers on his team. And I was like, okay, I'm getting Drew Brees. Next pick, kick back. Boom, he took Drew Brees. So what did I do? I had to tilt. I wasn't ready for it. But I tried my best and I stayed water. I went out and picked another running back. I picked up Damian Harris to back up my Sony pick in round 8, which I believe was a good pick on my part just to have that New England backfield. I know a lot of people are off in the New England backfield, and I get it. But for me at that point, on the 8th round, I was like, okay, why not Sony? If this guy can get 200 carries this year, why not Sony in the 8th round? Because that becomes dart throws. And then in the 10th round, I was like, okay, why not Damian Harris? If Sony's knee doesn't hold up, I still have a backfield. So I stayed water, like we're saying. And I went out and I got Jared Goff in that league with my second last pick. So, and I still believe that's a great pick. Not as good as Drew Brees, but who knows? So it's about staying water in your draft. So yeah, that's that.
Yeah, and that leads into the point number 5. Prepare between picks. I mean, if you know you're 6 picks away, look at those 7 players that you want most and try to decide, if one of them drops me, am I okay with each one? So if a tight end drops you and you were planning to pick running back because, you were a little weak on running back, and let's say Kittle drops to you, make sure you already have in mind so you don't have to tilt pick when you're only a minute or 2 on the clock. Make sure you have in mind, okay, if Kittle does drop to me by some miracle, am I ready to pick him? Do I want to do that to my team? Think of what your team construction might be. So you're going to want to make sure you kind of plan always ahead between your picks. And if you're on the end That's even becomes more important because you have to kind of look at what the other person may be doing, right? So if you're on the 11th pick out of 12 teams, you have to look at the other team and see if he already has a quarterback, like Marcel had said, there's a chance he's not going to take one. It is a risk. I mean, if you really want that player, go get him. But if you think you can get another player and then get the quarterback or the tight end or whoever it might be on the way back, it is worth playing that game sometimes and not playing always chicken where you just pick them too soon and then they get one of the two players you wanted. Instead, you might end up with both players you wanted because you looked at their team as well. So always be prepared between your picks.
Yeah, no, I agree. And that, my next point, which is our 6th point today, is it's kind of a blended choice. It's kind of leaning towards choose your players, stick to your beliefs. This goes for two ways. Your players in the sense that if you choose a player, you're like, I know this guy's going to do good, and he starts doing good, you're going to become a fan of the player, you're going to love watching his games, and then fantasy football is going to be a lot of fun for you. But if you just choose a player because that's what the ADP said, you didn't really believe in that player, you don't like him, you don't like his team, fantasy football is not going to be fun. You're not going to want to cheer for him. You're going to want him to do bad so you can drop him. That's how you're going to feel in the end of things. So I say that and choose your player, but then I also look at this point as in crowded positions. So right now, where do I see the biggest crowded positions? The Giants, wide receivers. You have Sterling Shepard, Golden Tate, and Slayton, Darius Slayton. And then I look at the Jaguars. The Jaguars running backs right now. People are saying Armstead's going to be the guy for the year. Who knows? Ozigbo's there. My guy, James Robinson. We won't get onto that, but I like him. I had him high when he went undrafted. I liked him. And yeah, I have him in my Dynasty League. And then I look at the Tampa Bay backfield. Well, you have Ronald Jones. You have Leonard Fournette. You have, the veteran, Shady McCoy. Sorry.
Oh, yeah, I forgot about
My
him.
apologies. So you have Shady there. So people are like, oh, well, I believe in Shady being the pass catching back. Okay, well, late round, go grab Shady if that's what you believe in. To me, I'm going to say no, don't go grab Shady anywhere. Shady's been on 3 teams in 3 years, and there's a reason. He's no good anymore. I believe Ronald Jones is going to be the pass catcher there, but I do believe Fournette's going to vulture some red zone touches. So, but that's my beliefs. I love Ronald Jones. I love Ronald Jones all off season. So what's going to happen? It's hard to say. But then, so yeah, what I'm saying is when it comes to crowded positions, choose the guy you want. And if it doesn't work, tilt, drop, trade, whatever it may be. When I look at the Giants wide receivers, coming back to them, PPR, Golden Tate. That's my guy. I'm saying go Golden Tate every single time. Right now, at the start of the season, I believe Sterling Shepard is the best wide receiver there. But do I believe Darius Slayton at the end of the season is going to be the better wide receiver? I do. So when I look at standard leagues and half point leagues, I'm on the Darius Slayton fan page. Like, I'm all about Darius Slayton this year. So become late in the season, say you just start to see Darius Slayton starting to doing better. I'm going to say, hey, you have Sterling Shepard, or you have Darius Slayton, I have Sterling Shepard. Let's make a trade. Sterling Shepard's been better all season, and why not trade with me? If they want a little bit extra, okay, here's this guy on my bench that I don't play. So here you go. So that's what I'm trying to say when it comes to your players. Go get your players. Make fantasy football fun for yourself.
Yeah, and crowded situations do usually clear up when the season gets going, especially with that higher talent. I mean, look at which ones you think are the most talented. They usually rise to the top. So keep that in mind. If you like the player and you think he's talented, take him. There's a good chance everything might clear up for them.
Exactly.
So that gets into the next point. I know we all like to have fun at the draft, but you have to know your limit. You don't want to get in a DUI, drafting under the influence. And this is because if you do drink a little too much, you can make pretty dire mistakes. I was in a draft recently, and someone took Justin Jackson in the 4th round. Likely, he was a little intoxicated and was looking for Lamar Jackson and saw Jackson and just clicked draft, even though Lamar was already taken a whole tier before that, a whole row before that round. So that is the thing is, do keep that in mind is, yeah, you don't win at the draft, which is also my next point, but you need to build your foundation, and you don't want a terrible foundation that you're going to have to live with for the next 4 months. It's one night. Just drink if you want to, but don't go overboard. Know your limit. So you don't want to get behind the 8 ball when the season starts and have almost no draft equity if you do want to, and draft value if you do want to end up making trades, because you ended up drafting, Justin Jackson in the 4th round instead of Melvin Gordon. So do keep that in mind, is know your limits. And you can gain some good by other people not knowing their limits. Maybe coerce them to go a little further if you need.
Exactly. And like the term you use is you build your foundation at the draft, and that is so true. Like your first running back, it has to be a hit. Your first wide receiver, it has to be a hit, or you're going to be going downhill. And that's your foundation. That's what builds the sturdiness to your team. The ceiling, the roof to your team does not come at the draft. You're not going to be the best team if you do not do any acquisitions during the season. So your roof is your in-season acquisitions. That's how you're going to become the best team in your league. So by doing that, you got to follow podcasters, you got to follow Twitter, you got to follow beat reporters, you got to follow Roto World. Like you got to keep on top of things, and you have to stay water. You can't say, "Oh, well, I love this player. He's bad. The first 3 or 4 games, you got to get rid of him. Don't hold on. Trade. 1 year, Todd Gurley, 2nd year in the NFL. All year, I got trades for him, trade offers, and I was like, no, like he's gonna break out. He's gonna get back to what he was on last year. Yeah, that was Allen Robinson's breakout year where he had, I want to say 14 touchdowns with Blake Bortles. I had the offer. Allen Robinson and Hightower, who was the running back with New Orleans Saints that year, offered for Gurley. I rejected it. I regret it every day of my life because that would have won me a championship 100%. So stay water. If a guy's not producing, you got to get rid of him. So now we're going to move on to the 9th. Our 9th, second last point for the day is the running back and wide receiver balance. So I've statted out all teams. So if you ever want to question or talk about my stat outs, hit me up. That'll be at Marcel_FF on Twitter. So you can hit me up and we'll chat about it. But when I look at my stat outs, points per game or points over the season, for wide receivers, I only have a true drop in the 40s, wide receiver 40s. Yeah, there's obviously your tiers, like these guys are safe, these guys are going to highly produce, blah, 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 blah. For running backs, that comes at 18. After my 18th running back, I do not trust that guy to be my RB2. I don't, and I don't want them. Yeah, I'll want them maybe for a flex play or a bye week. Yeah, I'll want them. But I don't want to put trust in them. So when we're talking about the balance this year, more than any other year, I feel like the RB early approach might be the way to go. I honestly feel like players in the top 15 RBs, you can play them week in, week out, matchup proof, they're great. That also goes with the handcuffs. If you happen to have a guy like Drake, Sanders, Kamara, you need to go out and get their handcuffs in the 11th, 12th, even 10th round if they're a high value. Like Latavius Murray, high value handcuff. You can play him in your flex with Kamara in the same week. You're guaranteed a touchdown. You can play them in the same week, and you're going to be fine. So those handcuffs are more important with the COVID. But yesterday, I was on a long drive, and one thing came to mind. What was that? Well, if the Dallas Cowboys, if Zeke catches COVID or has anything to do with COVID, chances are Pollard's not playing that same week. So what does that mean? Maybe diversify your handcuffs this season. So I do like I'm going to draft Zeke. Zeke's not a high injury risk player. So I'm going to draft Zeke come 11th round. Oh, there's Alexander Madison. Doink. I'm going to steal him. Who knows? Might work out for me. So I like the diversification this year.
Yeah, no, for sure. That's one thing I would recommend, especially in a year like this with COVID possibly taking out entire running back groups. It's hard to say. But it's not a bad idea to snipe other people's handcuffs. If they let them drop too far, pick them up. I mean, look at Murray. I would love Latavius Murray on a team because if Kamara goes down, either I can use him and, get a whole bunch of points, or if my running back room is too crowded, just try to trade him to the Alvin Kamara owner. You might get a pretty good haul for him and he might only be down for a few weeks, right? So it's a thing to do is you get a lot of, draft value or trading value because you got Murray, and if Kamara ever goes down, which he's already dealing with a few injuries right now, nothing major, you can just pawn him off and get either a bunch of value or just use him. I mean, he was doing amazing last year whenever Kamara wasn't in. You got like a first running back, not RB1, but first running back in one of the weeks, and I think second in the other. He did amazing whenever Kamara wasn't there. So do keep in mind those high-end handcuffs. If they fall low enough, pick them up.
Yeah, and I want to build on that point is the handcuff point to me is I can draft Kerryon Johnson in the 8th round right now. If I already has, let's just say hypothetically I have 2 RBs and I'm going to start every week, I can draft Kerryon in the 8th round. I am never, ever going to play Kerryon. Unfortunately, that's the case. But if I grab a handcuff and their starter gets injured, okay, now we're saying that's a flex play. I have a guy I can put in my flex because he is now a starting running back, guaranteed 13, 14 plus carries a game, where Kerryon, who knows, especially with Adrian Peterson there. So guys like Kerryon, those situations, I'm just like, okay, I'm wasting a pick because this guy's going to sit on my bench all year, and I'm just going to say, okay, I hope Kerryon breaks out. I hope DeAndre Swift potentially gets hurt or doesn't prove out. So that's another thing to keep in mind is you want your guys you're going to play every week, and then you want seal and play players, people that if the opportunity comes, you can start them. You don't want to hold on to those mid production players that you're like, I'm not going to start them unless this, that, A, B, C, D happens. So I do like that approach as well.
Yeah, you want players that can either from injury or their own skill level find the opportunity to be one of the top scorers on their team. You don't want someone that's is just going to stay behind, like a Cole Beasley. He might get you, a solid 6 points every week, but he's never going to be the one to score you 15 points on a week in, week out basis. You're never going to have to expect that. Where, I mean, John Brown, if something were to happen to Stephon Diggs, he would be the one that would probably get the bump and targets and the bump. So you got to look at which handcuffs to also take. I mean, some of them, it's a murky backfield of who they are. So, and some like Pollard, you can see it's pretty straightforward. Same thing with Alexander Madison. Same thing with Murray. Those guys are going to produce at that level, and they're not. You almost don't even have to think of them as handcuffs. Think of them as backups. Just look for the backups of any team because you don't have to handcuff them with your own team. So, and that leads into the last point. Don't draft a QB early unless you have good value, and same thing with a tight end. Is right now this year there is plenty of both, which for tight end that's typically rare because we've had some seasons where it's like you get the first 6 guys and then there's nobody you want even as a tight end. You might 1 or 2. But this year, there is so many tight ends that have breakout potential that are undrafted. I mean, I've seen Mike Gesicki, Chris Herndon, Ian Thomas, Jonnu Smith still on the undrafted after the draft was done. So keep those players in mind because if you don't get them at a good value, don't take Kittle in the first round. I mean, you're not getting value there. You want to get good value when you draft. And same thing with the quarterbacks. Don't take Jackson in the first round or maybe even not the second if it's going to hurt your team because you can possibly get the next Jackson later on. I mean, look at the last 2 years with Mahomes and Jackson. They were both at the end of your draft or even undrafted almost, and they became by far their quarterback 1 of the season. This year, maybe it's Kyler Murray, or maybe it's even Dak Prescott. So you may have to pay a little bit more this year. The last 2 years were an outlier where you have people that were nearly undrafted and they'd be just boom to being the first one by far. But it just shows that you don't have to take those high-end quarterbacks if it's going to hurt your team in other ways.
Yeah, agreed. Derek, how many drafts have you been in that Robert Gronkowski has been drafted?
I actually don't know. I haven't paid attention to him because he's one I'm kind of off this year. He's a good player for the reason that we had our earlier point of he may do good right away and he'd be worth to trade away before he does wear down in the season. I always picked up Jonnu Smith or Hayden Hurst beforehand and didn't even really realize where he was on the board. I was pretty sure he was drafted, but I wasn't concerned for him.
Yeah, I've seen Robert Gronkowski be drafted out of 3 of my 4 drafts before the 10th round. Guess where I have him ranked?
I'm going to say tight end 14.
Tight end 18.
Wow.
Who's ahead of him? Hunter Henry at 17, which may be surprising. Chris Herndon, Noah Fant, Jared Cook, Ian Thomas, Mike Gesicki, TJ Hawkinson, Hurst, Jonnu Smith, Ingram, and then we're getting into your top tiers. Yeah. This is saying that I know you want the shot on Robert Gronkowski because everything's looking great, shiny new toy in a great place. Do you need him? No. If he's there with your last pick, take him. Take him. By all means, if you believe in him, take him. But you do not have to pay up for Robert Gronkowski because this year there is the next Robert Gronkowski. Who is that? Maybe it's your Noah Fant. Maybe it's your Herndon. Those are all guys you can get at the end of the draft. Mike Gesicki. Guys you can get at the end of the draft that are going to be great, week by week playable. So do not pay up. I know my earlier point was like, go get the players you love, but at the same time, don't be dumb about it. So I just got to say that.
Yeah, even if it's a player you love, don't draft him too far out of value. It's okay a little bit if you really love the player, but don't be doing several rounds earlier. Try to get him at least the cost it should cost.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Anything else today, Derek?
No, I think that's it for me.
All right, well, thanks everybody. That's a wrap for today's podcast. Please don't forget to click that button, like, and subscribe to our YouTube. Also follow us on Twitter. Our main account between the two of us is Boudreaux Bros FF, and myself is Marcel_FF. Derek doesn't have a personal yet for this, and please don't hesitate to reach out, ask any questions about our rankings, start-sit decisions, and trades, of course. Thank you very much, and see you next time.
See you.